We've got Nathan on the line as well, and also Colm Boyle, as I've mentioned, joins us on Skype. Colm, good morning. How are you keeping?
How are you, lads? How are things?
So the big talking point, I guess, when it comes to Mayo and the aftermath of the weekend that was James Horan stepping away. Did you get the feeling coming out of Croke Park on Sunday that this was the end of an era?
Yeah, I think so, Eoin. I just sensed that even after the Kildare game, I listened to his interview. I actually watched it back a couple of times. I got that sense from him that he just sounded a lot different than a normal self. He sounded actually quite emotional after that game, and I think it was the fact that 20 minutes ago, I think he might have thought, this is it. This is how my Mayo career as such is ending for him. And obviously he mentioned then how proud he was of the team on numerous occasions, and that's not something you normally hear James Horan say a lot in interviews. So I definitely got the sense that day that, you know, this was the end for him, or this was his last year, should I say. And you know, the fact that he went so quick after the Kerry game, I think what would have happened there, he would have told his team after the game, and then maybe close family members and whatnot, and then obviously gets a release to the media the next day, which I think was a good way to do it. Means it doesn't linger on for the next couple of weeks, and obviously, as you said, an end of an era, certainly for James Horan and that current Mayo team. But I think now, you know, we have to look into the things, move on, whether it's players and management, and the new era now begins.
So the second stint for James Horan was all about trying to build on what happened in between his two periods, just to try and get Mayo over the line. But the first stint, his first arrival, some people kind of forget that his job was to get Mayo back to the top table, to get Mayo back to being contenders again on an All-Ireland level. So what do you remember about, I guess, those early days and James Horan coming in and the changes that he made immediately in his first stint?
Yeah, well, I suppose the first thing was to recognise that the turmoil that Mayo football was kind of in, and I know Nathan is there, he'll remember it well. Like 2010 was a hugely controversial year in Mayo football history. Really got beaten by Sligo really quite convincingly in the Connacht Championship, and then go to Pearse Park and Longford and get beaten there as well. And that team came in for huge criticism, as did John O'Mahony at the time. And James came in, and look, I wasn't there in 2011, but you know what, all I can say is I got dropped off the panel in 2009. I came back in at the end of 2011, and there was just a complete mindset change. It was a completely different environment than what I'd left 2 years ago, and that he'd set a new culture. He'd set a new standards where everyone was driving to improve and striving to improve, and not just to improve yourself, but to improve each other. And we were becoming very critical of each other's games and looking, you know, to pick holes in each other's games and how we could all improve. And it was very much a case that it was all about the team. And if it wasn't all about the team for you, then you weren't for the team. And that was his mindset, and that was his culture. And he just drove a belief into us that if we did the work he was asking us to do and constantly look for improvement, then we could compete with anyone in our day.
What did that look like upon your return, when you go back in there and you mentioned the whole culture shift? Is it just some of the stuff that he's saying? Is it the training? Is like, what is it exactly that makes you think for the first time, right, okay, this guy's trying to do something different here, and things are a little bit different here?
Well, even straight away from his first year involved, he would have had a lot of local guys with him and local trainers. But then he kind of thinks, right, to really step things up here and move things on to the next level, I might need to seek a bit of outside help. And he goes and get Keane O'Neill, who had obviously huge experience and was going very well at the time with the tip hurlers, and brought him in as a coach. And all of a sudden things started to really lift off and take off from there. But it was, like I said to you, Eoin, it was more of a case that just showing us the way, basically showing us what we needed to do to compete, and not taking really poor standards as a given or something that was acceptable, should we say. And it was a case that calling lads out on it. If lads really weren't doing their stuff, he was calling them out on it, and he was allowing the culture where lads were calling each other out as well. If something wasn't good enough, it was being said.
What's it like, Colm, being the Mayo manager, essentially, the Mayo man as well? What's it like in terms of the pressure internally in the county, and just how much of a narrative it is, like from across the year, really, January to December, to be doing a good job and to be getting the best out of them?
Yeah, Johnny, look, it is, and I'm sure it's hugely, it had to have taken its toll on him, just the mental strain that's there every day. And I'm moving forward into the last 4 years, but the last 2 years of managing a senior intercounty team with COVID restrictions and lockdowns, like that must have been hugely challenging, and that would take its toll on anyone. And then you throw into the fact that you get to 2 All-Ireland finals in that as well. That certainly would have taken its toll. And last year, that final lost to Tyrone, like James came in for huge criticism, as did the team, but probably James more so. And I think so much was unwarranted
and personalised as well, like.
Yeah, and it was really, some of it was nasty, some of it was really, really disappointing to see. But I think the genuine Mayo supporter now, when they reflect on James's contribution to Mayo football, both as a player and as a manager, and let's not forget he was an outstanding player for Mayo as well. I think they were really appreciative of it, and really grateful for his service to Mayo football. And I suppose when you think back over the last 10 years of Mayo teams competing regularly at Croke Park and latter stages of the Ireland final, he started that, and obviously it continued with Noel Kennelly and Pat Holmes and Stephen Rochford, of course, and with James again when he comes back in. But there's an awful lot of people, I'll take for example the Mayo minor team that are in the All-Ireland final this year. That's all they know. They just regularly have seen Mayo competing at the latter stages of the championship, which wasn't always the case. And James, to me, started that whole process. So I think as a county, we have a huge amount of respect for him, and we should have a huge amount of gratitude for him.
At what point then do you start to think that you will get over the line when he comes back in? I assume that's how you felt actually, first off, that when he comes back for his second stint, that you start to think this is going to happen this time, that there's an even better version of Horan that's coming back to try and get us to the promised land.
Yeah, look at that was planned, certainly. And look at it started, very well. We obviously won the league that year, and we're building and got a couple of 1 or 2 new lads into the team. Then suffered that defeat to Dublin in the semi-final, and I think James's kind of mindset changed after that. I think he realised that to compete with Dublin in Croke Park, he needed maybe to get more athleticism into the team and more runners into the team to just be able to physically compete with them for 70 plus minutes and to try and build a bigger squad. And I think you've seen that over, say, 2020 and 2021, the amount of newer, younger players, more athletic players that he brought in, and our style of play probably changed slightly through that, and the fact that we ran the ball a lot more because of the players we had and the runners we had, especially from deep. So that would have been one slight change, I would say, definitely from 2019, just in regards of with the sole focus of maybe the latter stages of the championship and probably Dublin in particular.
And it does actually culminate then in the win last year. To what extent was that sort of, I guess, the icing on the cake of a Horan plan that had been set out from the end of 2019? Did you feel that some of the things that he was trying to instill in the team after the Dublin defeat in 2019 actually came to fruition and had actually been fixed that night last year in that All-Ireland semi-final?
Yeah, well, I suppose you mentioned it there. If you go back to that game, and what won us that game was, look, we came back very late into it, there's no doubt about it. But I'd say, especially in extra time, was probably our legs that won it, and the likes of Tommy Conroy and Ryan O'Donoghue and Oisin Mullins wasn't playing that day, and Owen McLaughlin before he went off. But the likes of these guys just giving us that extra energy that maybe we didn't have in the previous years and driving us on. And obviously Dublin were obviously pushing on a small bit more as well in their terms. But definitely it would have been, I think that would have been the plan for James, that he needs to do that after 2019. He needs to get fresh and your legs into the team to give us that bit more energy. Like I said, with Dublin in mind.
That was such a seminal game, that Dublin game, and just I'll never forget the atmosphere and the hunting down of Dublin to the point of submission in the end. And it just seems incredibly flat, Colm, that it's gone from that to this. I mean, we were talking last week, and I was saying, God, Mayo 4-1 to win any game at Croke Park, but they were just so. It was such a tame exit. It almost seemed like an unfortunately kind of forgettable end to his reign, because it shouldn't really be defined by that, I suppose. And that running game that you spoke about, I know there were injuries, but it almost seemed to have just completely plateaued.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you there, Johnny. I don't think he deserved to go out. And look, the lads, of course, gave it everything, but it just ended in a small bit of a whimper, that performance. And to me, it just didn't go out in a typical, dive your boots on James Horan, what a James Horan team looks like performance, and we have to give Kerry a lot of praise in that too. But the funny thing actually about yesterday's game is if you with on 50 minutes on the clock, if you're James Horan the night before that game, that's pretty much how you probably would have planned it. You're Kerry, if Kerry slightly rattled, they're not playing well, the momentum seems to be with your team, and you're getting loads of scoring opportunities, and you're obviously within striking distance of them, a point or two behind, but you can't convert your chances. And obviously there's only so long you're going to get away against Kerry. And once David Moran kicks their score to put them two up, they just kick on from there. But I think you're right, Johnny. There was a number of factors. There was a huge hangover from the All-Ireland last year. I don't think we can hide behind that. There certainly was in the county with supporters. Credit to the players. The start of the National League, they came back and they're firing, going really well. I think there's a draw in there in the first game, but against Donegal, but they win the first 3 or 4 games after the next 3 or 4 games after that, and then the injury started. Just all started to get with Tommy Conroy, and from there things just started to go downhill. And once you lose a couple of crucial players like that, just the whole morale of the squad, the belief maybe, and the confidence. And that's the one thing that really struck me from watching the team. It looked devoid of confidence. And sometimes when you just take too many blows like Mayo have had with injuries, certainly Ryan O'Donoghue, I mentioned this on Sunday, like if Kerry are missing Sean O'Shea and David Clifford, or if Dublin are missing Con O'Callaghan or Ciara Kilkenny, then they look very different teams. And for Mayo, the two of the best forwards in the championship last year were Ryan O'Donoghue and Tommy Conroy. We're missing them both, and we're relying then on Killeen coming in, who was little to no football played all year after a very serious injury to try and come back flying, which was, he done unbelievably well to do as well as he did, but it was never going to be that case. I expect him to be an awful lot better next year, but so many things factored into what was, when you look back now, a really, really disappointing year with the flat performance against Galway and 2 unconvincing win in the qualifiers. And Johnny, as you said, then to go out with a small bit of a whimper against Kerry. I think James, it was a sad way really for James to finish up.
I think it's interesting, Johnny, how you talk about the pressure of being an internal manager in Mayo, because he created that pressure himself. It wasn't there when he took over. As Colm touched upon, Mayo were a shambles in 2010. They were beaten by Longford. They were beaten by Sligo. It was what he did instantly that altered the perception of Mayo from, I think, hoping they might win an All-Ireland to, at their peak over the last decade, Mayo people expecting that they would go and finally win that All-Ireland. And you look at the team that he created very quickly, and Colm being a key part of that, like some of Mayo's greatest ever players. If you're picking in Mayo all-time 15, probably half of them are from that generation, if not more. And Colm, I'm just wondering on that sort of man management that he has, because, we look now at Keith Higgins and Andy Moran as, some of Mayo's greatest of all time, but those guys were 25, 26 when Horan came in. Like, they were very good players, but hadn't gone to that next level. How, and you had been, as you said, dropped from the squad, how he brought very good players to greatness on a sort of one-to-one level.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Nathan, because he changed the careers and the path of so many Mayo players, like even like the likes of Alan Dillon and that, and so many players when you go through it, literally just changed their careers by coming in and basically just changing the mindset, but giving us the confidence. And what he was very happy to do is to let players take lead and stuff. So once he trusted lads, he got a sense that things were moving, and he trusted lads really to take on from there. And he was very happy to watch on in the background and see what lads were doing. But probably the best compliment I could give James, and it might be a bit of a funny one, but you would just absolutely run through a brick wall for him, and that's sometimes for a manager that can be a difficult thing to get your players into that mindset for. And if you didn't deliver the performance, or if you came in and you lost a game, you really felt like you'd let him down, and that's kind of how you felt about it. But that he was so strong in so many aspects of his game, and people will give out about certain certain things, and like I said, I go back to the All-Ireland final defeats, but James as a manager got a hell of a lot right, and an awful lot more right than he got wrong, and sometimes that's all you can ask in a manager.
So I was just going to ask about the outside influence and maybe the difference between his two spells in charge, because, you know, the last 4 years, if you were to take the second half against Dublin out of it, I think a lot of people would have serious question marks about big parts of it. And something that was missing was that outside influence, like Cian O'Neill, Donny Buckley, what they seem to bring. I'm just wondering why, and if you have any sense of why he didn't have that outside influence over the last few years.
Yeah, it was certainly a change in mindset from James, because like he had Keane 2012, and then he moved on to Donny Buckley for 13 and 14, and Donny obviously stayed on after that, after James left. Yeah, I think James, when he came back, he just had it in his head that he wanted it to be a Mayo setup, and that's what he did, and that's what he stuck through his term. Whether it was right or wrong, but what all I can say about the team that he had there during my time, they were absolutely brilliant, and they, like the likes of James Burke comes in, who I would have played with, like the amount he developed on in his 3 or 4 years there was unbelievable, and he turned into a top class coach. So look, it is interesting. Obviously, brings Kieran MacDonald in after a year as well, and Kieran added hugely to the setup as well with all his knowledge and training methods. But it is an interesting one. It's one I can't, I suppose, answer. I don't know why he didn't go to look to the outside. But all I can say is the boys that were in there were absolutely brilliant.
Who do you want to see get the job, Colm?
Look, there's loads of names being thrown about at the minute. It's a funny one. I have a feeling Mayo are going to stick internal. I'd be surprised if we see an outside man. I know the likes of Jim McGuinness's name and Fitzmaurice's and Malik O'Rourke's are being thrown about here at the minute, but I'd be surprised if we do see an outside man. I think it's going to be someone from inside the county. You know, obviously, people are talking about Andy. I don't think it's fair to talk about that at the minute when he's managing another county, and Michael Solan that's with him as well would have been hugely successful underage with Mayo. So them two will probably come together. But like I said, there with Leitrim. After that, then look, I wouldn't be surprised if Stephen Rochford wants to be manager in Mayo again. He's an extremely young man. He gone away to Donegal. I'm not sure what his story is there. We're continuing on next year, but I wouldn't be surprised if Stephen, you know, was going to go back or wanted to go back, but you know, he might wait for another term. And then the likes of Ray Dempsey, who's obviously won the last couple of county titles with Knockmore as well, and Maurice Sheridan, who's maybe managed the under-20s in the last couple of years. But like I said, I have a feeling it will be staying inside the county.
It's funny, like, to even talk about this, really, considering how binary it is, like success. How do you define success? Mayo did not win All-Ireland in either of his terms. Will his time as Mayo manager be deemed a success or a failure?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Johnny. Yeah, I suppose it depends what you define success as you said. I would say you'd have to look at it as being successful. And I know an awful lot of people will be shouting down their phones and their radios saying how can it be successful if you didn't win the All-Ireland? But I go back to what Nathan just said there about where he brought the Mayo team from, and to be constantly competing at the highest level for up to 10 years or so. And what Mayo players need to do now going forward, both for next year and in the years after that, is to keep to that level and to be constantly competing, because the standards are set now, and we can't afford to go to a place where we aren't competing at the latter stage of the championship absolutely every single year. So that's what we need to do now as a county, and that's what the team needs to do, to constantly look to improve, to drive on, and to always be knocking at the door at the latter stage of the championship. And I think that's something that James obviously has started. So look, I'd look at it as a very successful term. I think 6 kind of titles in a national league, and like I said, always challenging at the latter stages of the championship.
Just finally, for me, it's probably not a bad prospect now, or not a bad time for the incumbent, in terms of, you know, they're at a little bit of a low. Expectations have been dampened a little bit, as opposed to maybe taking over 12 months ago.
Yeah, quite possibly so. But look, there is a lot of doom and gloom at the minute out there in Mayo. But I've read some national media stuff over the last couple of days, and I know that like Mark O'Shea I read yesterday has completely written Mayo off, saying that their time is done. But I wouldn't look at it that way. Look at it, if I was the new manager coming into Mayo, the first thing I'd be doing is picking up the phone to the older guys, the likes of the Lee Keans and Aidan O'Shea's, and making sure they're getting on board for next year, because they are vital cogs for the Mayo team. But when you go through it after that, then you're obviously hoping that the injured boys are back, and you go through the team after that. There is still the nucleus there of a very, very good team that can compete with certainly the 4 teams that's there in the All-Ireland stages this year. So that's the way I'd be looking at it. I think there's a nucleus there for a very, very good team. If the new man comes in, like I said, first key protocol, get on to the older lads, make sure they're back on board for next year, and look to drive on from there. And like you said, it could be a case that a new voice is exactly what the lads need to push on and give them a bit of fresh energy to look to go again next year.
Colm Boyle, great stuff as ever. Thanks a million for joining us this morning.
Thanks a million, lads.
Cheers. Colm Boyle, Mayo legend there on the line.